Welcome back to the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast, episode 49. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about buying food in bulk, why you would want to do that, how you can store it and prepare it, and just some of the things that I've learned from buying certain things in my pantry and freezer in bulk. Now, I don't buy everything in bulk, but there are some things that I do, and I have my reasons for that. My name is Lisa, mom of 6 and creator of the blog and YouTube channel Farmhouse on Boone. Join me as I share with you my love for creating a handmade home from scratch cooking and a little mom and entrepreneur life along the way. So first up, what would make you want to buy some foods in bulk? One would be convenience. So for example, one of the things that I want to talk about today is buying milk in bulk and not having to go to the milk pickup every week. I feel like I've come up with a strategy for this more recently, whereas in the past, I would get milk every single week. The reason is that where I live now, the place that I go to get raw milk is about half an hour away. It was a lot closer where we lived last time, so it was no big deal to go every single week. Also, now that I am milking a goat and I'm getting about a quart a day from her, I don't really need milk every week, and I would hate to go all the way out there for a gallon or two. So what I'm doing now is I'm getting my usual 4 gallons, but only going every other week, and I have a little bit of a strategy for that. Another thing and reason that you would want to buy in bulk is if you are ordering directly from a farm and you are getting meat. So I've talked about this before, but I like to order my pork and beef in bulk. Recently, I purchased a quarter of a cow from my sister, actually. My younger sister has a farm. I've ordered it from lots of different farms over the years. Same with pork. The best way to order direct from a farm is by doing it in bulk. So by getting half or a whole and getting all the different cuts. So that's another thing, is just the accessibility of pasture-raised meat. Usually you do have to get some level of bulk. Another reason is having it on hand. So there are certain things like salt, for example, that I would never want to run out of. And whenever you're cooking from scratch, you're going to use certain things so much because that ingredient isn't in the food you're buying because you're just buying basic whole ingredients. So salt is an example of that. If you're baking your own bread, grains is another example of a time when you just don't want to run out. And certain things don't go bad. The final reason that I usually buy in bulk is for cost savings. Certain things just are a lot cheaper whenever you get them in such a large quantity. One would be honey. The place where I get honey from, you can get it by a little quart or a pint, but if you buy it by the gallon, it's a lot cheaper because it's so convenient for them to sell it that way versus having to get several different customers. So let's first talk about grains, how I buy them, where I buy them, how I store them. There's been lots of different ways that I've purchased whole grains over the years. I purchased a grain mill, several years ago, probably about 10 years ago now. With that, you have to start finding little sources for grains. Now, at the time, online shopping wasn't really a thing, especially you wouldn't have ordered 50 pounds of wheat online, whereas now that's really commonplace. But what we did is we'd go up to the Amish community that was nearby where I used to live. And when I say we, I mean friends from church, my sister. A lot of times we'd take turns and we'd all take orders from people around us and be, asking around who needs grains, who needs butter and honey and all the other things that they sell up there. So that was where I would first get it. At that particular shop, I used to get hard white wheat. Now you can get hard red wheat. The thing about the hard is it has the higher gluten content, which is necessary to make bread. So if you want that stretchy dough, whenever you're kneading the dough, you have to get a hard wheat, which has that higher protein gluten content. Soft white wheat is better suited for things like quick breads, muffins, that kind of thing. I actually never bought that because I don't make enough of those things. And if I do, I can just use hard. So you'll see hard white wheat, hard red wheat. I used to buy a brand called Wheat Montana. I think that was the name of it anyway. That's what they sold. At the time, they did not have any organic, so I just bought what I could get. Nowadays, I've switched over exclusively to einkorn. I don't know how the supply is right now because pre-COVID, I ordered a huge bag, like a 50-pound bag of einkorn berries. And then it just so happened that right after that, COVID struck and I was good to go. But I know a lot of people really struggled to get a hold of grains. So I don't know if those are back in stock and no longer a problem or if that is still a big problem going on. But I like to order from a company called Mockmill. There's also Breadtopia. Jovial is a great source. I also really love ordering grains from Country Life Natural Foods. You can get that at clnf.org. That's their website. I actually just recently ordered some rye, spelt, and kamut. That's probably not how you say that last one. I've used them a lot, just don't know how to pronounce it, because I want to make a few sourdough recipes from those grains for my blog, but they also have wheat berries. So I don't know if they have einkorn, but they have the others. So yeah, Mockmill, which I made a little bit.ly link, you can get that at bit.ly/einkornberries. Jovial sells bulk einkorn berries. Lots of great sources. Now, when you get them, I prefer to store them in food grade 5-gallon buckets. And I learned a long time ago that you want to spring for the twist top lids. Now they're a little bit expensive. You can get them from Country Life Natural Foods and put them right into your bulk order. But it helps to have about 2 of those on hand because when you're constantly getting into your grains, you don't want to have to pry open a 5-gallon bucket lid because they're just so annoying to do. So you definitely want to order those lids. I'll leave a link down in the show notes because I forget. I think they're called Gamma lids. And you can Google around and see if you can find them somewhere else a little bit cheaper. But they really are a good investment if this is something that you're going to do. Because I like to mill my grains really fresh. So I don't put a whole bunch of grains through the mill and then store them. Now sometimes I make a little bit too much. That's just what I happen to do. And I'll do that. But I prefer to get in and out of it every single time I'm making something and mill the grains fresh. Now, on the note of buying things bulk because you can get access to healthier things, here's an example because you can buy whole grain flour. You can find that probably at just about any store, including Walmart. But you lose nutrients. As it sits, it right away starts decreasing in the nutritional value. So anytime you can mill your grains fresh, you have the ability to preserve that. And not only that, they last longer. So you can store 50 pounds. So let's say you want to buy a 50-pound bag of wheat or einkorn berries and you're worried that, you have a small family or you don't bake a lot. They'll keep for years without being milled. Whereas if you're going to buy a 50-pound bag of flour, you better be baking a lot because that's not going to last forever. So put it in a 5-gallon bucket, get one of those Gamma lids, and then just put it through your mill each time that you're baking. A great mill source is Mockmill. They actually did give me a coupon code. So if you go to bit.ly/einkornberries, there are mills and there's einkorn berries, and I think they offer 5% off, but when you go there, you can use code Farmhouse, and I believe it'll be 5% off. I have the Nutrimill, but I am thinking about getting the Mockmill. Now, I like my Nutrimill. One of the reasons I'm thinking about getting the Mockmill is the same reason that I ended up getting the KitchenAid mixer, and that is just the appeal of them. They're really pretty. And so I think it'd be really nice to have it sitting out all the time, whereas I have my Nutrimill in a cabinet. But I do have a whole cabinet right now designated to grain milling. So in that cabinet, I have my 5-gallon bucket of einkorn berries. I have my mill, and then I have an extension cord. Now, it'd be better if I had the outlet wired into that cabinet, but it wasn't something I thought about beforehand. So whenever I go to mill, I plug it into the outlet above the counter, and then I just have a little scoop in my 5-gallon bucket. I put it straight in the mill, and then flour is instantly available. If you don't have a storage spot, it might make more sense to get one of the trimmer mills so that it doesn't have to take up so much real estate. Now you can do that same exact thing with any grain. So right now I told you all the different grains that I have on hand. I will make them all into flour just by putting them through my mill. Now also, I use that mill to make corn flour or cornmeal, and I just put the mill on the thickest setting and put popcorn through it. So that's something I've done to make different like cornbread and things like that. Now when you buy grains in a 50-pound bag, you will have more than just one 5-gallon bucket worth. So I also will keep an additional 5-gallon bucket over in the pantry with a lid. You could just buy one Gamma lid and just transfer the lid whenever that one runs out from the one that has the Gamma lid. So if you're trying to keep costs super minimal, I'd recommend getting 2 5-gallon buckets, one regular lid, and then one Gamma lid for the bucket that you're constantly getting in and out of, and then also a grain mill. Now that's of course if you're just gonna do one kind of grains. If you want to explore into baking with rye or spelt, you might want to get another 5-gallon bucket as well. I will link all of these sources down in the show notes that I like to get grains from. Another good source is Azure Standard. So if that is a co-op that delivers near you, then that would be better. Country Life Natural Foods is more for the Midwest. And the way that it works is a minimum order of $500, you can get free shipping. So my sister and I, we can do that together, no problem, because we both have large families. We cook a lot, so we can just do that order, just the two of us. But if you have a smaller order, you can get together with a lot more people, maybe make the drop at your house, then you don't have to travel to get it. Now, with Azure Standard, there's already lots of drops, and likely you will find one in your area as well. So again, I'll leave all of those down below. All right, next let's talk about meat. I love buying my meat in bulk. It is not only the only way to go whenever you're buying a quarter or a half of a cow or a pig from a local farmer, but it's also the most convenient thing ever, because every time you start your week off and you want to make sure that you have enough meat thawing in the fridge to build out your meals for the week, which is what I highly recommend. I talked about this in podcast episode 8, how I don't have to meal plan, but do have from scratch meals. It all starts with thawing out some quality cuts of meat and being able to pull from that throughout the week, adding in some vegetables and herbs. The way to do this is to have your freezer stocked. Currently, I am down to a little bit left from a deer from November. I just got a bulk chicken order, and my cow, I'm supposed to call it a steer. I've been corrected by my sister many times, but you all understand what I mean by that. I have a quarter of a steer over at the processor right now. Now the tools that you need for that, of course, the biggest thing you need is a deep freeze or an upright freezer to store all that meat. It is pretty much the only way to go, because if you don't have an additional freezer, you can only order very, very small amounts. It doesn't make sense to go to a large pickup for that if the farm is far away from you. And also, a lot of times a farmer won't offer meat by the cut unless it's really pricey. So they do sometimes, but you'll get it at a farmer's market and you're going to pay ridiculous prices. So it's one of those things that you're going to have to invest the time and the space. Like for us, the freezer is an upright freezer. It's the only one we could fit, and it's on the mudroom, or it's in the mudroom. And it's in a spot that I really don't love, because when you come in the door that we always constantly come in and throw our boots and our coats and our swimsuits or whatever, the mudroom, it's right there by the door. Like the door barely clears it, but it's pretty much the only spot we have. Now we could probably get it down in the basement, but then every time mom needs to get meat out, I'd have to go to the basement. So the convenience was weighed in a little bit there. So it's a little bit inconvenient, but it makes my life so much easier and my accessibility to farm raised meat possible. I can fit in my freezer, and it's really hard to say because I get asked this question, how much can you fit all the time? But it's always one of these moving things. Like it's not like my freezer's ever empty and then I order half a cow and half a pig. It's like I'm halfway through my cow and then my pig order comes in, and after I'm halfway through that, my chicken order comes in. So there's always a lot of different meat in there. My goal is to keep it as full as possible. I haven't yet overlapped myself enough to run out of storage. But if that would happen, I would talk to my in-laws or my parents to see if anybody has any extra freezer space, Worst case scenario, we could get another freezer maybe out in the barn because it is just so nice. You don't even have to go to the grocery store in the summer, hardly at all, if you have chickens for eggs and you have milk pickup and you have a farmer's market or a garden. You can mostly avoid the grocery store if you are well stocked with meat. Now, of course, I do have to go to the grocery store, but so much less because I always have that to pull from. I have my bulk grains, and then the fresh things, at least right now, are very accessible. Another key to remember if you are going to be ordering bulk meat is to check your freezer, okay? Just the other day, our freezer door was left by somebody, it could have been me, I really don't know, a little bit open. Now, all the meat in it, when I checked, was still cold, but it definitely thawed out halfway. It's happened to my sister one time. She was storing her meat over at her in-laws and the door was left open. It thawed completely. She actually had to get rid of that meat. So that is something to remember. If you are gonna order bulk meat, check that freezer at least once every 2 or 3 days. If you catch it early, like I caught mine early enough, we've already eaten a lot of it. And so clearly it was fine because we're fine. But that is a risk that you take with buying meat in bulk, and it can be very expensive. You will save money in the long run if you don't waste it, but you better check. Otherwise you could possibly waste it. Also, when you buy meat in bulk, you have access to bones. If you're gonna make bone broth, you're going to need bones. And if you have the whole chicken, or if you're getting a portion of an animal, you can always request the butcher throws in the bones, and you can always have bone broth, which is how I'm able to make so much bone broth and so much soup here in our family. So it's the way to go. I wouldn't do it any other way. Constantly having to go to the store to get meat and things like that is not something I'm interested in doing. Okay, the next thing is milk. This is something I never thought about buying in bulk. Now I've heard a lot of people froze it. The dairy farmer that I go to, she said that during COVID, people were buying double and triple amounts of what they usually buy and just freezing it. So that's an option. That's not what I do though. Personally, we almost exclusively use our milk as yogurt and kefir. This is what we've been doing for years. So I don't know why it never occurred to me to instantly make all of the milk into yogurt and kefir, because whenever you do that, it preserves it. So you can keep kefir in the fridge for a couple of weeks, whereas fresh raw milk, when you smell it after about 8 days, is pretty much around the time, well, yeah, around that time, just over a week, it's very sour. It's not bad, it's still good for you, but it isn't pleasant. It's not something that I enjoy drinking. So what I did last time we got milk is usually I'll make kefir. We have so many kefir grains. The temperature in this house is so warm that it ferments really quickly. So I'll make it and then I'll put the grains in the refrigerator until I need to make more kefir. This time what I did is I just kept it going until after 3 or 4 days, I had made a bunch of kefir. I fermented a gallon of it into yogurt. And so by about day 4 or 5, it was all preserved and ready to be made into smoothies throughout the duration of the rest of the next week, because I'm only going every other week now. So my tip for that, and this is probably not groundbreaking, I bet a lot of you already do this, is to, if you are going to only get milk once every other week, or maybe even once every 3 weeks, is to ferment it all into kefir and yogurt, and it will keep so much longer, taste so much better if you do it that way. So there's my little tip for that. It felt groundbreaking whenever I thought of it. I do find that yogurt will keep even longer, and that's just because when you make yogurt, unless you're making raw milk yogurt, which you can only thicken by adding gelatin, I have a tutorial for that on the blog, but unless you're making raw milk yogurt, the first step of making yogurt is to heat it to about 180-ish degrees, 165. So that makes it last even longer. Now that does make it no longer raw milk, but you are introducing the good bacteria that is in yogurt, in the yogurt starter. So that will keep even longer. I personally prefer just to make raw milk kefir, and we have so many grains that I can make a gallon at a time. I can get all of that milk fermented within 3 days, and then we're good to go. Make smoothies. Lastly, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but let's talk a little bit about vegetables. You might not have or be in the season of your life where you can grow most of your food. I am definitely in that season of life. I have these big dreams and desires, and I see people online who are planting 100 hills of potatoes and growing 80 tomato plants so that they can make all of their pasta sauce for the rest of the year. And I just have like a regular size garden that we enjoy fresh stuff all throughout summer, but then after that, the preserving doesn't take us very far. But it started to occur to me that I have a really great farmer's market. Just a couple weeks ago, I went there and bought 20 plus heads of cabbage from a local farmer, made it into sauerkraut. This is something that you can do. So you could go up there, find a farmer that you trust that has taken good care of their farm, buy out their tomatoes. Just buy as many as you can. Come home and do a canning day, and then you can still enjoy that local farm fresh health benefits and taste without you having to do all of the work of the planting and harvesting. So as far as buying vegetables in bulk, canning, fermenting, both great options to enjoy those all through the fall and winter until the next summer. So that's another great thing that you can buy in bulk, store in your pantry if you are canning, find a spot in your fridge or get an extra fridge if you are fermenting. I was able to fit the 5 jars, so I did 5 half-gallon jars in my refrigerator. I just had to work some things around, but at some point, if I continue to do this, if I make a whole bunch of fermented salsa this summer, it might benefit me to put another refrigerator somewhere. Now we do have the basement and it's pretty cool, so I could also store it down there as sort of a root cellar. All right, well, I hope that I answered some of your questions. I've gotten a lot of questions about how I store bulk grains, how I do bulk meat, and those are the ways that we handle them. You can visit more over on my YouTube channel and my blog. I show you how I cook a lot of the cuts that come whenever I get a bulk meat purchase, which is one of the great benefits. You will encounter cuts that you never really knew existed if you've only ever bought grocery store meat. If you're unfamiliar with how to make them, the first thing to do, of course, you can just Google it, Pinterest it. You'll learn something new and you'll just be able to diversify how things taste. It'll just be such a treat. For today's random Instagram question, who from Instagram would you love to meet in person? Well, I've actually met a lot of people from Instagram in person. This is something that I do. In fact, I just made plans today for a meeting in October with my friend Paige from Farmhouse Vernacular. We're gonna go to an antique show. I can't wait for that. I have plans in August to hang out with a few blogger friends for a few days. Last weekend, my friend Sarah Jo actually came to visit our farmhouse, and believe it or not, the weekend before, we visited her farmhouse as well. There's a little bit of a story as to how that happened 2 weekends in a row. But there are so many more people I would love to meet. I have my local blogging friend, Julie Blanner, and so I've been to her house several times. So many, I told you, in pretty much all the podcast people that I've interviewed I've met in real life. I still need to meet Jay Morrill, and I would love to. But there are so many. I'm trying to think here because I pretty much want to meet every one of my Instagram friends at some point, and that's why I go to blogging conferences and make plans with people. And really, honestly, Luke and I want to make this place a place that I could invite and host people. So we want to turn the little cottage in front of our house here, which I mentioned in my last podcast that that'd be done soon. Yeah, okay. We live in an old house, so clearly we ripped stuff off and found that there were way more problems than we expected. So that's not going to happen next week, but we are working on it. But I want to turn that into almost like an Airbnb, but only for people that we invite, not for a paid thing. So we have big intentions of a lot of that. This property, way more than our last place, really allows for that. We want to fix up the barn to maybe have some kind of fall barn party. I want to invite people to stay here. So many people from my Instagram, and I really do have intentions of making a lot of that happen. But I don't really want to mention anybody because I don't want to like leave anybody out, especially because if I did leave them out, likely I really did want to meet them. I just didn't think of it. So I really want to meet everybody. I'm an extrovert though. So plans like that get me excited. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. If you do not yet have access to my free resources with all of my ebooks and printables, I even have some building plans for an arbor that will be added to that page soon. You can get that at farmhouseonboone.com/farmhouse resources. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in episode 50 of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast.